Welcome back to another episode of the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Strength and Speed owner and Mud Gear Battle Alliance Pro, Evan Preparis. Got two guests with me on the line. Before we get to them, though, quick word for this episode's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Squirrel's Nut Butter. Squirrel's Nut Butter is an anti-chafing product. If you're at OCRWC or OCR Everest, you probably got a free sample from me. And pick them for this episode because, you know, nothing is scarier than having horrible chafing between your groin or even on your chest there. I've had some chest chafing in the nipples area. Not pleasant. Make sure you pick up some Squirrel's Nut Butter. They're awesome. All right, let's get to today's episode. Joining me, I got Bobby Ross, filmmaker. Bobby, welcome.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Hi, y'all. Good to be back.
I'm always looking for an excuse to bring Bobby on because I enjoy talking to you.
Well, I enjoyed talking to you, too. I look at it. It's been over a year since I've been on this podcast. That is terrible. We've got to fix that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's hard to squeeze in reasons that are conducive to the podcast that are logical to bring you on. But I've managed to shoehorn this one in. And I've also got Gary Shaw returning for like the third time this year from Leaky Hourglass Ultra and beer drinking fanatic here.
Hey, Evan. How's it going?
Good. So this episode is the Strength and Speed OCR Treehouse of Horror or OCR Course of Horror episode. So we're going to be talking a lot about horror movies because Halloween's coming up, and we're going to loosely tie OCR into it. So there'll be a little bit of OCR talk, but there'll be a lot of horror movie talk. So we'll see how people like this different format. Just with Halloween coming up, and I wanted to BS with some of my friends who are horror movie fanatics about that. So what we're gonna do is we're basically gonna go from person to person. We're gonna talk about a horror franchise, talk about some things that are good about it, some things that are bad about it, chime in as a group, and then kind of rotate through. So I'll start off, then jump over to Bobby and then Gary, and we'll get through as many times as we can, covering a couple different franchises. So I think if you're talking about Halloween and horror movie franchises, the one you have to start off talking about is Halloween, right? So the Michael Myers, the white William Shatner mask that was modified. And there's been so many of them. And it is, not only is there a lot, but it is probably one of the most confusing series to watch because there are, what is it, Gary, 4 timelines? 5?
I think there are 3 actual timelines. You have the original timeline, or then the sister timeline, which broke off into H2O, and the one I'm drawing a blank on the name with Busta Rhymes. But yeah. And then you and I were talking about how Halloween 3 had absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the series. Yeah. So I don't know if you're counting that in there, because if you're using that, there are actually like four lines. Yeah, so there's Halloween 2, then 4, 5, and 6 is a single timeline. Then there's Halloween 2, H2O, and then like Resurrection is a timeline. And then there is Halloween and then the new one. So Halloween 2018 or whatever. Oh, and you're right. There is one more because if you consider the Rob Zombie remake.
Rob Zombie's a separate timeline. So honestly, Google it, and a bunch of charts will show up, and it'll explain it to you. But super confusing to watch. I also listened to an audiobook available on Audible where they do a deep dive into every single Halloween movie. This guy really did his research. It's almost overkill because it's like 18 hours of Halloween stuff. But the one thing I realized, which being not from the film industry, like as a kid, I always thought there's like one person behind all the movies and it's this cohesive plan and there's this plot. And then like listening to the book, I was like, oh no, this is a disaster. Like 4, 5, and 6, they end up having a different director, different producer for each one. The only person that was the same is like the guy who like owns the rights to the property. But they were literally creating story arcs but not having an idea of how the solution that it was going to finish. They were just like, well, here's a mysterious man in black. And then it's like, it's up to the next director to figure out who that was or why that's important.
So that's a huge trope that is used in TV a whole lot too. Like J.J. Abrams did like a TED Talk where he called it like the mystery box, right? Like one of the reasons why so many people were disappointed with the ending of Lost. You remember Lost? Like they set up so many different mysteries with only the purpose of getting people to like watch the next episode. And there were just so many going on that they couldn't possibly have wrapped all of them up at the end, because what keeps you going is like, so you gotta like dig deeper for a gasp each time until you get to a place where it's like, well, we can't wrap all of these up. And so if you're going in cynically to try and make money off of a movie, the best thing you can do is just to set up a mystery, right?
Yeah.
And then leave it to somebody else to fix it.
Yeah, that's what the Halloween franchise becomes. And then you have John Carpenter, who wrote the original. They essentially like peer pressured him in to write the second one. And he was like he admits, he's like, yeah, I basically got drunk, couldn't think of anything. And then I was like, I don't know. Jamie Lee Curtis is Michael Myers' sister. Fine. And then fast forward like 30 years, and he's like, that was such a dumb idea. And he literally erased his own movie, which is what, the new Halloween trilogy does. It picks up as a sequel from the 1977 or 1978 version.
Yeah, what do you guys think of that? I really liked the first one. The second one, I'm on the fence about.
Same. But the third one in the trilogy, and theoretically the conclusion of the Michael Myers saga, comes out, I think, October 14th. So
early premiere the 13th. Me and some guys from the Firehouse are planning on trying to go see that. So, and you're talking about the new films. One of my favorite things about that, and this is going to be really, really dark, because a lot of firefighters get killed in that movie.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. So Halloween Kills, the opening scene where it got left off, the house is on fire and Michael Myers is there. So my shift, our shift sticker on our helmets is Michael Myers holding the bloody Halligan.
That's awesome.
That is badass.
Feel free to hook up me and Bobby with one of those stickers. Side note.
I'll see what I can do.
Yes, please.
So the one thing, I never liked Michael Myers that much growing up. I mean, I watched it because it was part of like horror movie kind of culture. But the one thing I didn't realize is how much ahead of its time was. So it was, late 70s. And at the time, there was not like the stereotypical guy in jumpsuit walking around killing people that we got with like Jason and some of the other kind of spin-offs. So it was really like a lot more revolutionary when you look at it in history. And I didn't quite realize how much earlier that was compared to some of the other horror movies I grew up watching in the 80s and 90s. So just my 2 cents there.
Yeah. I mean, like, the greatest thing about Michael Myers is that, like, as far as like all of the identityless sort of heroes, like the ones that can become like legends, like Jason or Freddy or whatever, I feel like Michael Myers is the one that still has the ability, at least for me, to make me interested again. Like the mystery of who he is and why he does what he does has never been in any way satisfactorily told in any of these movies, which is what I really like. Like, I mean, they just like exposited the heck out of Jason and Freddy. Like, we know too much about him, I feel like. But Michael, like, because of all the different timelines, is still kind of a mystery. Like, I don't know, like, who really is this guy?
So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if I'm investing in multiple movies, I eventually want some answers. And one of my complaints about Halloween is they just keep like, no, ignore those last three. This is new timeline. You can't.
Yeah, you can't. They've overused their mulligans for Halloween.
I agree.
I feel that.
All right, let's jump into a new movie series. Bobby, you pick the topic.
Okay, I want to talk about Hellraiser because I just watched the new Hellraiser last night.
Me too.
And I am super into Hellraiser. Like, I think, well, at least the first few anyway, because if we talk about like the time that the original Hellraiser came out, this was at like the height of like, this was peak slasher film. And then you get this strange first-time director. Yeah, dude, that was the year I was born. It was like, what we were used to was a bunch of guys in masks going into, slumber parties and, like having a good old-fashioned massacre. But then here was Clive Barker, a first-time director, by the way, deciding that he was going to, he'd already had a couple of his movies like made into, or a couple of his scripts rather, made into some kind of terrible movies before. But then he decided he wanted to like give a go at, directing like one of his short stories. And so he took it, he made a screenplay out of it, and we get Hellraiser, which is this just crazy, weird, out of left field sort of psychosexual thriller with like 10 minutes of these Cenobite creatures. And it's such a strange thing to watch. It's full of really groundbreaking VFX. Like, Attic Guy, I don't want to spoil anything, but like there's some amazing
1987, yeah.
Dude, it still holds up to me.
It does hold up. It's practical effects, which is what.
Yes.
To me, it's just better. Like we can do all the CGI, but when I know for a fact it's happening, the practical effects in Hellraiser are still amazing, in my opinion.
Yes. Now there's some stuff that doesn't hold up in Hellraiser.
Yeah,
right?
true.
It's obviously like
the lightning.
Yeah, all the drawn lightning. The creature that you can see the guy behind him, like in towards the end in that hallway.
The engineer,
Yes.
Are we talking from the second one?
No, the first one.
Okay.
The hallway thing that looks kind of like a gecko upside down, and it has
Okay.
Yeah,
it's the
the
engineer.
jump scare right towards the end.
Yes. So that was pretty rough, but it was so different, and what it lacked in like overall kills, it totally made up for in just being like out there.
So but I wanted real quick. I forgot to tie it into OCR. So so I was watching not a horror thing. It was a self-defense thing, and they were arguing that the most realistic self-defense would if you combined essentially boxing, so punching people, and training like that, and parkour. So my question for Gary is, and we have a biased probably group here, but what's the best athlete for surviving an encounter with Michael Myers or someone like that, like Jason?
I'm going to say, endurance runner, like parkour, like pretty much endurance OCR athlete. Like I have a buddy that told me this story one time, and it just really made sense. He always joked around and said he just wanted to be able to do one muscle up. That's all you ever need to do. He said he'd watched so many horror films, and life or death comes down to being able to muscle up onto a building. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes perfect sense.
So
yes,
obviously I agree. I think OCR is I think parkour is better because it's realistic environments. But problem with parkour guys is they're not endurance. So they they have to run 100 meters and that's it, and then they reset. Right, not even. Versus an OCR person can climb over walls, they can crawl under things, they're used to using their hands. I think an OCR athlete is like the prime athlete you want to be if you were trying to run away from Michael Myers, Jason, etc. And you're used to running on trails. So like Michael Myers, Jason typically attacks in the woods. So to me, that makes a lot more sense. All right.
Here's a question: Can Jason or Michael Myers run at all?
They can. I mean, no. I don't think canonically they have run on screen. They just walk fast, and everyone else is very trips and or they throw something, or they get caught on a fence in one of the latest Halloweens. Right?
It's always very Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail.
Yeah,
Lancelot storming the castle. It's okay. Michael Myers is way back, or Jason's way back. You see the victim, and then you see him again. They're way back, and then just boom! All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're there, like Lancelot at the castle.
I assume he's running very fast when he's not on screen. That's what I assume. He's just got not a lot of endurance, so they always pan back to him, and he's walking. All right, so back over to Hellraiser. One of my favorite things about Hellraiser. So if you're not familiar, right, there's a box, and then they open it, and then essentially these demons come from hell, and then they take the person who opened the box. And essentially what I really liked is, especially in the first couple of Hellraisers, like the first and second one, they're not the demons are bad, right? But they're responding to human desire. So the humans are asking for, unforeseen pleasures, and these demons show up and they're like, oh, you asked for pleasures? I got some pleasures for you. It's going to be like nothing you've ever experienced. And they torture the person. And there's one scene in the second one where they come, like a girl actually, essentially an innocent girl accidentally opens the box, and they show up and they're like, nah, she didn't know what she was asking for. And they leave her alone, which I always thought was a cool take on a monster versus someone just indiscriminately killing.
Yeah, there's this sort of thing in Hellraiser about sort of the limits of the human experience. there's this sort of kind of idea that if you follow pleasure long enough, eventually that pleasure will not be enough, and you'll have to move on to something higher and more extreme.
Like
and as
endurance OCR.
kind of like that, and that's where I'm going with this. It's like there's a certain amount of pain inherent in reaching the next level, and that those extremes are just like heightened. Obviously, like Hellraiser is about the extremes of pain, but as an extension of a person's searching for and striving for greater pleasure, like hedonistic pleasure, which is something that not like in the weird way that Hellraiser does it, but like it's something that has to do a lot with endurance, right? Like the reason why we do it, even though it hurts and even though like in the moment it can be terrible, is that the feeling at the finish line is better than anything else. And you have to go through the pain to get there.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the new one. Obviously, we're not going to give any, try to avoid some spoilers. So one of the funny things was, I watched it with my wife. She actually agreed to watch it. She's never seen any of the other Hellraisers. So she was like, is Pinhead supposed to have more screen time? And I was like, oh, no, actually, this is more than normal. It was a lot more than normal. If you're not tracking, Pinhead in the movies is a male. And when they cast this new Hellraiser, it is a male to female trans, right? So I think when they announced it, a lot of people were like, oh, what is this, like woke America, blah, blah, blah. And so, but if you go back to the source material, The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker, the character of Pinhead was actually, they couldn't tell the gender. They said it was androgynous with female characteristics. So it actually is actually truer to the source material, kind of on a interesting side note. But so we're watching it, and there's one scene when they first go into like this warehouse, and I don't know if you noticed, the male actor goes over the fence like he's an OCR athlete. Like he pivots at the hips, puts his hand on the far side of the fence, and swings his leg over. And I was like, dude's an OCR athlete, which I thought was just really. I just thought it was really funny that like, because normal people don't go over a wall like that or a fence. It's just a very interesting way. So.
You were way over analyzing this. That's great though, but because it's like once you said that, like I can replay that scene in my head, and I'm like, yeah, he totally did that. Like, yeah.
I because you don't see that in movies. That's why it stood out to me. I was like, that was a really weird way to go over a fence. And as an OCR person, that's what I look at. So what did you think of the new one? Good, bad? Gary, you start off.
You and I already kind of talked about this a little bit. Like, I didn't like it as much as the original, and I actually, like I said, I thought the visual effects, like from where we've come since 1987, I thought we had come further than that on the visual effects. Like I honestly, but like the drawn in lightning aside, I really thought the blood and everything and the Cenobites were scarier and better done in the original film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I thought it was kind of, as far as the like antagonists, I thought they were kind of dumbed down compared to the original. Like I thought,
very tame.
Really?
Yeah, and I think part of that could be, watching it, it came out in 87. I probably saw it whenever I was like 10. So I was probably like watching it in like 94 or something. So maybe it was because it was scarier then, but actually a week before it came out, I rewatched the original, or a week before the new one came out, I rewatched the original. So, and then, I just, the other day, the day that it came out, we watched it at the Firehouse, and yeah, I thought it was just kind of, the story was good, and with them swapping, like, because they didn't just swap the antagonist, they swapped the gender of the protagonist as well, to an extent. Because, without spoiling things for the new one or even the old one, just how they built it up, focusing on the female more, and how they like revised kind of Frank's character with the the entrepreneur and everything.
Yeah.
like I said, it was good. I'm not gonna trash it, but I liked the original better.
Yeah, I think the original felt way more original, whereas this one just like every beat is like a Blumhouse like horror film beat. It's like you could like probably go minute by minute and it looks like just like every other sort of horror film script of the past 20 years. It's like basically like you shoehorn like these awesome Cenobites into what is basically just every other horror movie script, which it just felt a little as like, oh, I felt like we could have taken a few more chances with this. Instead, what we get is like, all right, we frame up our protagonists, like we hit the beat where they're like, oh, well, there must be somebody who knows. And so we go somewhere and we meet somebody who tells us about it. And then then we go back to like the mansion and meet the real like antagonist. And then like without spoiling anything, it's like pretty much every one of these beats is like, we've seen this before in a James Wan movie, you know? Which is not necessarily bad. If you're just in it for a good time, then cool, you got it. But if you were looking for something that was as like groundbreaking as the original Hellraiser, this ain't it.
Gotcha. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I'll caveat this with the Hellraiser movies have been getting progressively worse.
Oh boy, the 9 before this.
This is, I think there's 10 total, and this is 11.
11 now.
So, whoa, I was wrong.
So technically, I mean, you can call this a remake, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You can plop this into the timeline of all the other ones, and it doesn't change anything. What's interesting about the comics and the book adaptation? So essentially, Pinhead's nails is essentially the equivalent of like a crown. So in the comics, they actually transfer like when there's a new Hell Priest, the nails go into someone else's head. So theoretically, it can be part of the same timeline, and there's actually no problems there. And then also in the comics,
so the female version is simply a successor.
Successor, yeah. So it fits in fine. And then on top of that, the comics also have multiple. So in the movies, we see the same Hellraiser box. The one in this one is kind of like a redesign. It looks very similar, but it's slightly different. In the comics, they have sometimes they have puzzle boxes. Sometimes they have merry-go-rounds. Sometimes they have there's a short story that has a Pokemon card, like the Pokemon card from Hell. It's basically like it's different things that can kind of open that pathway. And what I really like about the comics is it actually ties fairly well, as ridiculous as it sounds, into like actual Christian canon. And the book, if anyone wants a really good book, it's on Audible. It's called The Scarlet Gospels. It is the sequel to Hellraiser, which is the book version is called The Hellbound Heart. And essentially, the Scarlet Gospels is Pinhead as Hell Priest trying to overthrow Satan, who's obviously in charge of all hell. So like the portion of hell that the Cenobites come from that we see in the movies is essentially like one of the 7 areas of hell. So, right, so the 7 deadly sins, and the area they cover is lust, essentially. So there's like other portions of hell that cover other, of the 7 deadly sins. So it's really, yeah, I can't recommend the comics enough. It's seriously some of the best comics I've ever read, and there's some really shocking moments. And actually, in this scene with the guy who has all the collection of like occult artifacts, there's a knife that looks like one of the knives from the comic. I don't know if it was purposeful or not, but it does, and it's in the background. So I thought that was kind of cool.
You caught one of the Easter eggs, my man.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be random, but I don't know. I thought the Cenobites designs were cool. So if you've watched the originals, they wear a lot of black leather, and I think largely that is because one, tie back to the S&M kind of characteristics, but two, I think it's a budget thing, right? Like I can't put hooks all over. I can't do all the effects all over this dude's body, so they just do the face basically. And in this one, I think it's probably closer to what Clive Barker originally had in mind, where some of the Cenobites essentially have these like very elaborate things where their skin's being pulled and torn apart.
I thought there were some pretty awesome designs in there. Like there was some cool stuff.
It reminded me of there was a toy line called Tortured Souls by Clive Barker and Todd McFarlane, and it reminded me.
Spawn, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when
new
McFarlane
Spawn
was
coming out, by the way, too.
Is there really?
Yeah, Jamie Foxx has been cast.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, the original version had Michael Jai White.
Oh,
Boy,
really?
that
Was that-
happened.
Yeah, John Leguizamo and what's Charlie Sheen's father's Martin Sheen.
Yeah. It was, boy, that movie was something. That was before comic book movies got good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great soundtrack though.
All right. Any final thoughts on Hellraiser people wanted to share?
I think it is the best horror movie reboot of the past 20 years.
Oh,
And I would say it's 6.5, 7 out of 10.
okay.
I think it is a more interesting reboot than the new Halloween trilogy, even though I enjoyed those immensely. I think this one did some cool things, and there's just a cool factor to the Cenobites that I just think it's just like, these are just real movie monsters, and I was happy to see them back.
Yeah. Cool. I can talk about Hellraiser for the entire episode, but we won't. In the interest of moving on in time, we're going to jump to a different topic. Gary, what do you got for us?
Okay, so first, real quick, I'm just going to jump back on that, and I'm going to ask you guys, who's your favorite Cenobite? I'm gonna go with Chatterbox.
Absolutely.
Same.
That scared me. I saw those teeth my entire young life.
So the Chatterbox or Chatterer essentially has his mouth being pulled open and he doesn't talk. His teeth just kind of rattle back and forth. So the original we're talking, right? Or are we talking? You're talking the new one?
The original was more interesting.
Yeah, the original was more interesting. Like I said, that's my thought on every Cenobite.
Yeah.
But yeah, even with Chatterbox. But I thought they did an okay job with Chatterbox in this one. But yeah, so I'm gonna roll into kind of, it's not one of the like what I call like the big four. It's kind of out there because like I consider like the big four. You've got Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Hellraiser. That's, in my opinion, those are the big four of horror. So
I don't think Hellraiser's in there, although it is one of my favorites. But go ahead. I would agree with the other ones, though.
So Phantasm.
Oh, yeah.
So Phantasm, for like one of the things like seeing it as a kid is like the main antagonist wasn't, this gory monster, just not really slasher film. I just remember growing up and seeing that character in the movie and even just walking through I'm going to date myself here and say going through the like Blockbuster, the box for Phantasm and seeing Angus Scrim, the guy who played, like his character simply referred to as the tall man. He was just so scary. And there wasn't really much of a gimmick to him. I was thinking about how to describe this earlier today, and the best way I can put it is a murderous, disappointed father. Like, yeah. I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed because no one liked to hear those words growing up. He was just disappointed. But then you add a murderous streak to that. And he was just the scariest guy to me growing up.
So this one's not a common one, so I'll give you audience a little bit of explanation because I just literally watched them and then listened to an audiobook by the same guy who did the Halloween deep dive that covers the Phantasm movies. But so essentially the tall man is a undertaker, and he is like an interdimensional undertaker, and he takes people and crushes them into dwarves, and then he has this army of dwarves, and they've got these metal spheres that stick to your head, and they drill and shoots blood everywhere. And the I was talking about how Halloween has all these different directors and producers. The Phantasm movies seem like they have different, but it's actually of the same group working on every one, which was very surprising because they seem kind of disjointed. And if you're looking for answers, the frustrating thing about Phantasm is they don't give you a lot of answers. They give you a lot of questions. So there are several points in the movie where you're like, all right, well, now they're going to explain what's happening. And then you watch the next movie and like it only asks more questions. And they've made 5 of them. The first one was it 77? And
79.
79. Okay, and the last one was I think 2016. So that's a crazy story in itself how they came out with 5. But there's like a 30-year gap. It spans like 4 decades between, or more than that, right? Like the first movie, the first movie's in the 70s and the last movie's in the 2010s. So yeah, it spans a long time, and they actually got the original cast. Before Star Wars was bringing people back, before all these other like Cobra Kai reboots and stuff like that. Phantasm brought their cast back for Phantasm 5.
One of the cool things I thought about Phantasm was how they didn't fall into the normal trope. Like, yeah, there was completely, like, what's the word, gratuitous nudity in there, and like with the females, but they didn't fall into that typical trope of having these like pretty boy antagonists. Like, I mean, one of the main guys, Reggie Bannister.
Yeah.
That, like, you do not look at that guy and think like, oh, he's going to be the backbone of a horror series. So Reggie Bannister, one of the antagonists, like balding guy with a, one of those nothing on top and then a ponytail, haircuts, kind of almost there is.
Looks like my 8th grade chemistry teacher.
Yeah, like everybody has one of those. Like everybody knows this guy, and it just kind of like, that was one of the cool things I thought about it, is he was kind of a Joe everybody. Like watching that, because as a kid you watch these movies and stuff, and you're like, oh man, I want to be the hero, and you're like, you see all those big buff guys and whatnot, and think, oh man, that's unattainable. And then you see Reggie Bannister, and you're like, well, I could do that.
Bobby, have you seen the 5th one?
I have not seen the 5th one. I didn't even know that it existed. I am ashamed of myself.
So what's crazy about the 5th one, and I think you'll appreciate this, is it started as a web series, and they shot like 40 minutes of web series in like when Angus Scrimm, the tall man, was still alive. And then at some point they're like, all right, well, let's turn this into a movie, but it's already half done. So they give it to, they hire this director, and it's like, here's half your movie. Make 45 more minutes of footage. So he's got this like half finished movie, and so he's got to like shoehorn this web series into this full length movie. Angus Scrimm dies in the middle. Essentially, he shot a couple scenes but was sick and eventually dies. And but honestly, I think the 5th one's in my opinion, the best one besides the first one, obviously. But it's, you end the movie and you're like, is it a dream, or is it a dementia, or is this all in someone's head, or is this actually happening? And it gives you, as the viewer, it gives you a lot of options to kind of choose your own adventure, which can be frustrating, but it's also kind of cool. So
that's awesome. Fantastic, man. I'm so glad you bring that up. I haven't seen those in years.
So I remember I watched the first 3 or 4 when they were, obviously when in the 80s, 90s, and I was very upset. Rewatching them, it was kind of like watching the X-Files, where like you're like, all right, there's more questions, and at least with the 5th one you get some answers. It's not a lot of answers, but I enjoyed it a lot more this time, and I enjoyed, after being involved and working with you, Bobby, and like seeing some of the fun of filmmaking. It seemed like the cast of that, they're like old family at this point, and they get together once every like decade to shoot a fun horror movie together, which I can just see that as like a really fun thing to do, even if you're not banking in the money there.
Yeah, dude, horror movies are the most fun to make because nobody takes themselves very seriously when you're doing something like that.
So tell me real quick about like how shooting a horror movie. I know because you shot a couple of shorts, and then feel free to plug them. Like how that differs from shooting like a obstacle course race event.
Yeah, well, actually, this past weekend, we just wrapped principal photography on what is definitely my biggest short yet. I was the director of photography, and I'll edit it as well. And so we shot basically a huge difference in horror based on a lot of other movies is that the budgets are typically very, very low because they have, like they can make money with very little. And so we shot, it was a little over 20-minute film, I think, is what it's going to end up at. And we shot in 3 days, 3 16-hour days. And it's just kind of like you just like hit the ground running and you move as fast as you can, which in that way is very similar to OCR. But the biggest difference really is that like what's happening at a race is something that's happening one time. You don't get another chance at it. You just have to be in the right place at the right time and pointing the camera in the right direction. Whereas, you know, when you get to decide how you want things to be, it can take a lot longer to put it all together. So I really enjoy shooting OCR for that reason, because when it's something that, you know, those magic moments are happening, when somebody does something that's just really awesome and you were there for it, you don't get to, you know, you don't remake that. You don't just say, hey, would you go do that again? Well, I mean, sometimes you can, but not when there's a race.
If you're doing a charity event and Evan is your subject, yeah, sometimes you make me do the obstacle more than once.
Oh, yeah.
During OCR Everest, we were going across the rings at Tough Mudder, and you made me go across like 6 times or something. And at towards the end, I was like, I don't know if I can do this again. I was like, I was laughing because my grip started going because I'd done it essentially like finished. All right, back to the start. Finished, back to the start. But you know, it's pretty funny.
Hey, we needed a really good one there.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't Stairway 3-0.
That's true. That's true. Side note, we were right about the kind of the Stairway to 3-0. We were pretty close on the OCRDVC podcast. We're gonna swing it back over to Bobby for the next movie suggestion.
Y'all, Nightmare on Elm Street has to be talked about if we're doing a classic horror franchise conversation, right? Right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Freddy is so bad he's good. Like this guy is having
He's
such
campy,
a
but
good
lovable.
time. Yeah, it's scampy. Absolutely. And the absolute best Nightmare on Elm Street is the second one.
Oh no! Oh my goodness!
I watched this literally. Like the end credits were rolling whenever Evan called.
The second one. How do I describe this? People who have never seen it, you know, like a lot of people make jokes about Top Gun's like underlying subtle themes. The people
Point Break is another one.
Point Break's another one. The themes in Nightmare on Elm Street 2 are so strong. You're like, I remember we were watching it as we were like late teens or early 20s, and we were like, what are we watching? It is. They made a documentary about the lead character of it. I think it's called like Scream Queen or something. That should give you kind of an idea of what some of the themes in Nightmare on Elm Street 2 are. The first one though, I think is one of the best horror movies ever made, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
And it has my 2 favorite deaths in any horror movie, period.
You gonna say Johnny Depp?
Yeah, Johnny Depp, the blood geyser in the bed. And the one
groundbreaking.
The one where the female gets dragged across the wall, up the wall, and across the ceiling, and the boyfriend's awake, but she's still asleep, and she's like being torn apart. Yeah. So.
Yes, dude.
Again, spoilers for movies from the 80s. Sorry.
Hey, I think in the beginning of the second one, there's the boyfriend is watching, where she's like kind of dragged around the ceiling. They do it again, but I think they did a really great job there at like iterating on that, even though it was kind of disappointing that they basically used the same effect twice.
But the third and fourth one are two. I love the first one, and I love the third and fourth one. Fifth one's okay. Third and fourth one has the Dream Master and Dream Team one concept.
Yeah, Dream Warriors was part 3, and Dream Masters was 4. Dream Child was 5, and then it was Freddy's Dead, the Final Nightmare.
Yeah, and then the New Nightmare.
Then they went off canon and did Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
I think that's underrated, my opinion. It doesn't fit in with the rest of them, but it's I thought it was a unique twist.
I thought that was probably my favorite. Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. The gentleman that played Robert Englund.
Robert Englund.
That was, in my opinion, his best performance in any movie I've seen him in. Was his performance in New Nightmare. Yeah, whenever he was having the nightmares, and like making the pictures and stuff, how threatened and bothered he looked, because you always saw Robert Englund as Krueger being this, entity of evil, and seeing him as a person and like the concern and worry that he had in that film whenever he was talking to Heather Langenkamp.
Yeah.
Like it really, like it was a really good performance by him. And I think that movie is like grossly underrated.
So if you've never seen New Nightmare, essentially the premise is that it's a movie within a movie, right? So the movies are all movies, and they're focusing on the actors who are now in this movie that you're watching. So they're like, yeah, Freddy Krueger's a movie character. He's not real. And then essentially weird things start happening. So that's why it's called The New Nightmare. And it's got for instead of Freddy having the normal glove, he has this like bone muscle glove. It's kind of like an extension of his hand. It's pretty interesting. It was a nice.
Yeah.
And instead of wearing like he still wears the shirt and the normal pants, but he's got like this trench coat and this hat. It's going to give him like a slightly different look. It was pretty cool. I liked it.
It was also a much darker feeling movie. Like it didn't quite have that same like the original films, or the preceding films rather, were a lot more kind of tongue in cheek.
They got really tongue in cheek in the later ones. Yeah, they got really tongue in cheek. So.
But New Nightmare was dark.
Yeah,
and I really liked it.
I agree. Yeah, Freddy's always been one of my favorites, and I think from a monster perspective, I think he's just really good because like everyone has to sleep, right? You can't not go to sleep, and everyone's had a bad dream before, right? So I think that really plays on like a real fear of people, and I think that's something unique. Yeah. I'm going
to say something that could be, I'd love to hear what your guys' take on this is, but I think that the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot was such garbage that it was almost impossible to watch.
Oof. It was okay. I just have a really strong, Robert Englund is Freddy to me, so seeing someone else in the role was just kind of like, eh. The one thing I thought they did do good about it, right? So in the original, it's never said that he'd like molest children, but it does say he abducts children, and then you can start putting pieces together if you want. In the one thing I liked about the newer one is they implied there was a portion of the movie where they're like, no, he's essentially wrongfully accused or something. So you start having like empathy for him, and then that kind of again spoiler.
They pulled the rug back out. Yeah. I like that, and I thought because James Haley or something like that.
Jackie Earle Haley.
Yeah, Jackie Earle Haley. I thought, he wasn't Robert Englund, but I thought he still did a good job. If it would have been one of those, and I can say this about a lot of like reboots and stuff. If I had never seen the originals, I would have really thought he did a good job. But yeah, I went into it already fixated on the fact that Robert Englund is Krueger. So it kind of, I went in there with a little bit of distaste for Haley to begin with. But like I said, if I wouldn't have seen those movies prior, I think he did a good job.
Yeah. I see my problem is not Haley. I think that that was a really good start for a new sort of series with him. However, the horror movie logic was just so bad. Everybody made all the worst decisions in that movie. It was top tier 2010s, don't go in the attic, go outside kind of thinking. It was so much of that I was just I didn't care anything about these kids. I was just man, I wish there were twice as many so Freddy could just end all of their bloodline, so hopefully their children would make better decisions.
Yeah. I watched it once and I don't really remember much of it. I remember being okay, that was okay, but nothing I'm gonna start watching on a repeated basis. So All right, any other final thoughts, Gary? Any sort of sleep deprivation stories you got from some of your ultras?
Oh man. I've seen some weird things, like sleep deprivation. That is, you can't escape that. So I do think that plays into the whole like inherent fear of the Krueger like villain is like you can't escape sleep. Like it's not if, it's when.
Right.
Because yeah, like during the ultras, like I don't know how many times like I've had pacers like tell me after the race that I was just talking about things that I have no recollection of, like walking off the trail and them having to correct me, seeing things that weren't there. I think my favorite hallucination was an anthropomorphic white rabbit in a red Letterman's jacket smoking a cigarette. He didn't say anything to me, but as I was walking past him, he just kind of gave me that good old boy head nod and took a drag off of his cigarette. And like I could pass a lie detector test, like saying that like that really happened. Like it was so real. But I think that's probably the best one that I've had.
Gotcha. So for anyone getting ready for World's Toughest, sleep a lot the 2 weeks beforehand. That's probably the best advice you can do, because you're not going to gain a lot of fitness those last 2 weeks. You won't get any. You need to recover and rest. And if you're hallucinating on a 24-hour race, you're not sleeping enough the week prior. I'll say that.
Yeah, 2 weeks out, the hay's in the barn.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah, just sleep a lot. And I mean, obviously you'll still be tired, but you shouldn't be hallucinating for a 24-hour unless you're chronically sleep deprived from work. All right, Gary, let's jump over to you for another movie topic.
Okay, so I don't want to say digging the bottom of the barrel, because this is one of my favorite horror movies ever. It's just not as widely known, but the people that know it love it. It's a cult classic, Sleepaway Camp.
Oh, goodness.
Yes.
The
height of schlock.
Goodness.
Like I've said this before. This was like an M. Night, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, like M. Night Shyamalan, like his type of movie, like before he was ever around. I think it was 83 was when that was released. And it had one of the best twist endings.
Oh my goodness.
Of any movie ever. And it was really like one of the first movies that I ever remember having any kind of a twist ending.
Yeah, same. And it was, the ending of the first one was emotionally scarring for a bunch of me and my teenage, my friend, also a teenage boy. I don't want to give away the
controversial.
ending. I don't want to give away the ending, but it was emotionally scarring. And we were like, I don't think I want to watch the second one. I'll just say that. Yeah.
So, and there were three more.
Yeah, we watched all three eventually, but just not happy about it.
3 or 4 more, I think.
Some of my love for endurance and completing things, I think, comes from watching horror movies, where when I start a horror movie series, like I'm watching all of them. It doesn't matter how bad they get. Like I'm in it for the end. So I think I get some of my perseverance from endurance racing from that.
But this is one of those that, like, you can't really talk too much about, because like this is one of those movies that I don't want to ruin for anybody.
Oh yeah.
So you can't really talk about it too much. Just it's got an ending, and like the kills in it
the kills are so great.
Yeah, like it was very, very innovative at the time for kills. I mean, because some of the, especially like, because I'm big, like, I mean, I love horror films. Obviously, we all do. We're sitting here talking about them, but everybody kind of has their like little subgenre of horror. Like I've got friends that don't like slasher films, and like that's my gig generally. Is I love like the old 80s B like slasher films is like my bread and butter. And then I've got friends that they like the like psychological thrillers and like the I don't know really what the paranormal kind of stuff. I've got a bunch of buddies like that. And I'm not really into the like paranormal stuff as much. I like the slashers, but I can still appreciate those as well. But like a lot of those slasher movies, like you can pretty much count on like somebody dying a certain way. Like somebody's going to get their head bashed in with like a claw hammer, or there's going to be a couple, being intimate and getting double harpooned with like or some kind of spear. Like, but at the time, like the kills for, and there was one that I'm not going to go into, but it was in your head. It's very graphic, but it's never shown on scene. You simply see a shadow and you can tell what's going on. And it's rough.
Yeah. It is. It makes the kills in the Friday the 13th movies look, which were its contemporaries, look just tame in comparison.
I don't have a good, all I remember is the ending of the first one. I can't tell you anything else about the other sleepaway camps. I don't remember much about them. It's just that ending of the first one is seared into my brain. It's just seared in there. Oh man. I have the intellectual property for me has to start in the 80s or 90s or maybe late 70s for me to be interested, just because I think that's when I was really into horror movies. So that's, if it started in the late 70s or 80s or 90s, then I'm interested in it. If it started in 2000 and beyond, I've got no interest. It's just I don't know. And I feel like horror movie goes through phases where there was like, there was like the giant monsters with King Kong, Godzilla, then it went into like, the Universal monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, and then it eventually turns into the slashers. And then we had a period where it was like zombies, and then there was a period where it was like spooky ghosts type things, like The Ring and stuff like that. And I feel like it goes through these phases where you find one formula for success, and every other company's like, well, let's copy that, and we can make a little bit of money before this interest dies out.
Well, that's not just even horror movies. I mean, the same could be like, remember whenever Armageddon came out, like how many end of the world movies came out after that? Like, what was it? Deep Impact, and then you had like, I can't remember the exact order of this, but like Dante's Inferno.
Oh yeah, this volcanoes.
Brosnan,
through like 2012.
2012, yeah. The tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or something.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Random useless fact: the proper name for the day after tomorrow is called Overmorrow.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, I like that.
I'm gonna start using it. All right. Well, I'm gonna jump into what started. This was not really a franchise; it's a single movie. The reason Gary's on the podcast is because I was showing a movie to my daughter. And Gary started chiming in, shooting me messages. And I was like, oh, well, Gary knows a lot about horror movies, so I need to bring him on this podcast, me and Bobby. So I watched with my daughter Monster Squad.
Yes!
Bobby, have you seen Monster Squad?
No.
Oh, my goodness. So it's the Goonies, but they're fighting the Universal monsters, essentially.
Oh, what? That sounds great.
It is. I based my childhood on this movie. This is like I had, me and my friends were like had like a monster club. And
did you have the little business cards?
I want to say at some point I probably made it on my Apple IIe. I can't really remember. I remember buying pins.
I love that movie so much.
So I'm watching it with my daughter. I'm like, this is a good movie. It's like the Goonies. And the movie starts off, and let me just put it this way. In the first 10 minutes of the movie, they would cancel this movie in 2022. The main characters are saying jokes, and I'm like, I can't have them say these words in front of my daughter. And then there's this whole plot line at my daughter's 7. There's this whole plot line about being a virgin, and they're like arguing, and my daughter's asking me what it is, and I was like, it's when it means you've been married. If you're not a virgin, it means you've been married before, basically. She's like, oh, the teenage girl was married? And I was like, yes, absolutely, she was married before. But it is such a classic movie, and the most classic line of all, Gary.
So there are several that you could put in here. But I'm thinking you're either going to go with give me the amulet, you bitch.
Oh, yeah. There was also that line, which I was like, oh, again, my 7-year-old doesn't need to hear that.
Okay, so
there's 2, actually.
Wolfman's Got Nards.
Wolfman's Got Nards, yeah. They kick Wolfman.
That's the more age-appropriate
of
the ones, yes.
Classic, absolute classic.
And there's actually a documentary called Wolfman's Got Nards, if you haven't seen that. Evan.
I have not, but I found out about it after watching the movie, so I'm going to put it on my movie list. Yeah. So good. And like literally that club format is like, again, I based my childhood on that. I mean, I was kind of involved in clubs in college, and now like Strength and Speed is It's the modern day equivalent of what my Monster Club turned into. So here we are.
I can't believe Bobby hasn't seen it.
I don't know. Like I probably thought, I don't want to watch a kids movie. I want to watch something scary.
Yeah. If you're a couple years younger than us, but not much, but I think you're probably just out of the age range, right? Like you probably narrowly missed it.
Yeah. So it was 87.
That was the year I was born.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, we got a little bit more time left. Anyone else want to throw another movie franchise out there?
So I'm not going to throw a franchise necessarily out there, but I'm just going to talk about real quick one of the greatest special effects and makeup artists to ever grace the screen, Tom Savini.
I was going to say you're going to say Tom Savini or Stan
Winston.
I was. Yeah.
Savini has worked in so many different films, and some people would recognize him from his actual like roles as an actor. I can't remember his character's actual name from. I just remember him. He was the guy from Dusk Till Dawn that had the
genital gun
revolver in his genitals.
Yeah, the genital gun.
Yeah. So, and he's been in several other movies and TV shows. But,
he was like one of the lead punks in the original Dawn of the Dead.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, he did all the makeup effects for it too.
Correct. Yeah.
And he did the so Halloween kind of was like his, or no, not Halloween. Friday the 13th was like his big kind of like breakthrough. Like where he really started to get known. And talking about like all these movies, another, like I know you guys like documentaries and stuff as well. If you've never watched any of the movies that made us series.
Oh yeah. I watched
those. Those are great. Like they've got one like Ghostbusters, Home Alone, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. And it's funny, you like a recurring theme in almost any of those that have to deal with a horror movie is you're going to see Tom Savini in it because he has done something.
The one thing I've noticed as I've gotten older and kind of gotten more involved, and I mentioned about Halloween, like what did this look like in the time it was released? There were some other like significant things, like the original Godzilla was released. You know what it is off the top of your head? I want to say it was like 1950.
I was going to guess 52.
The point is it's not far after World War II. And the point is it's in Japan. And there's this radioactive monster that's destroying Japan and is essentially a story about the nuclear bomb. That's like kind of some of the inspiration they used for it. And it was like a controversial film at the time. Because like, I mean, we dropped 2 bombs on Japan only a couple years before. And here you are essentially making like this giant monster movie that's developed from nuclear, essentially is a nuclear powered, monster that's basically obliterating the city and you can't control what's going on. So that was another one where it was like, oh, this is like super like kind of controversial for its time. But, when we look at it in hindsight, we don't realize what other world events were going on at that time.
Yeah. So that was 54. So that would have been 9 years after the bombings.
Yeah. That's recent, that would be, super recent.
Yeah. That wound's still open.
Absolutely. And there's still plenty of people who are remember it, or have relatives that are, still receiving like the, negative effects from it. So,
well, and so many horror films were sort of like commentaries or at least reflections of social mores of the time. Like, you think about like slasher films, especially Jason and Friday the 13th. Like this was during the time of like the moral majority and like, kind of a red wave in America. And here you have this character who is basically like bringing down judgment on all of these immoral kids,
which is why anytime there's like, I remember when Scream came out, a bunch of people who were not horror fans went and saw Scream. And you know the part in Scream where they explain the rules of horror movies? It's like, well, if you show nudity, you're gonna die. If you go someplace alone or say I'll be right back, you're gonna die. I remember kids at school were like, they were like, wow, that look at all these rules. It's like, did you guys not know these? I was like, I thought this was common knowledge because me and my friends had watched dozens upon dozens of horror movies at that point. But yeah, did you see the new Scream?
I haven't.
I haven't either. I'm scared.
It was okay. It was good. I mean, the first one was good, and then I don't know.
Oh wait, never mind. I did see it. That's how much I remembered it.
I haven't been really a huge Scream franchise person, so I watched it. It was good. I don't know. Again, nothing right home about.
Anything of Craven's, like I'm kind of partial to at least give it a chance.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I've always liked about Wes Craven is he's willing to poke fun at himself. Like he kind of like sees the humor and like looking back and like even some of the stuff like the last time I watched The Monster Squad, like as much as I absolutely adore that movie, it's one of my favorites. Like I took Nicole to the Alamo Draft House to watch that because occasionally they do the retro movies, and I took her to watch it. She had never seen it, and as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like you kind of see the campiness of it now that you're older or whatever. And I've always liked that about Craven is he can look back at his prior films and stuff and kind of see the humor and like, man, what the hell was that? And kind of make fun of himself. Like in the original Scream, if you remember, Wes Craven was actually a janitor in that movie, and he was dressed like Krueger.
Yeah.
He had on the hat and the sweater, and he was mopping the floor.
Yeah. It was so good. He even did like the one that he did with Christina Ricci, like the werewolf movie, was such wonderful, utter campiness. It was like almost into like a comedy.
I don't know which one that is.
I think it's Bitten. Might be Bitten.
I used to have a huge crush on Christina Ricci. Side note.
Oh,
still do.
Everybody did.
It started when I was a little kid and age appropriate. I'm gonna say because I was about around I think she's a year older than me.
I was gonna say. So did it start with Casper or did it start with the Addams Family?
Addams Family.
Okay.
But again, age appropriate. I was appropriate age. She was like a year older than me at the time. So
it was Cursed in 2005.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember that one. Again, it's post 2000, so my knowledge drops off precipitously once we get past 2000. Yeah. We'll do a quick, Friday the 13th is obviously another classic. I think a lot of people don't realize that Jason doesn't get his hockey mask until number 3, so it's kind of like a late addition. And essentially, Jason's not even the killer in the first one, which is also a lot of people don't realize that. And the 5th one to me is by far the worst one because the killer's again, I'm going to give a spoiler here. The killer's not Jason; it's just some random dude imitating, which is good in like I can appreciate it in hindsight. But when I remember watching the 5th one, and then it was like, and this guy is the killer, and I was like, what the? It's like I just wasted an hour and a half. So angry.
Yeah. So the 4th one with Corey Feldman as young Tommy Jarvis.
That's one of my favorites.
I think that's outside of number 1, that's most people's favorite.
Yeah.
Is, everybody like, our age kind of grew up with that, the Coreys, and just, it's hard not to like anything that Corey Feldman was in.
Yeah.
So I think that played into it a lot, and like that, especially that ending scene with Feldman with the like crazy shaved head.
Yeah.
Like it was just great.
And a lot of the damage to the Jason mask you see in the other movies happens
from that film.
It happens in 3 and 4, but but some of it builds up over time, but you can see some of the damage to Jason to his eye and stuff like that. It
wasn't the original, like his original mask wasn't it just like a potato sack?
Yeah. It's a burlap sack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not iconic.
I thought that was creepier.
Yeah, it was less human and more sort of like Yeah, like ghostly. There's no eye. There's no face.
Yeah. Oh man, good one. And so I saw, I saw Jason Goes to Hell in theaters, and I saw Hellraiser Bloodlines, which is number 4 in theaters. And both times my dad took me, and my dad was the oldest guy in the room, and I was the youngest guy in the room by like huge age gaps. You know, it's like teenage kid. You know, and I can't remember how old he was at the time, but it was.
Your dad is a hoot, man. I would have loved to have been in that theater. Like, what did your dad think of the movies? Like, is he a horror fan?
No, not really. He's just a good dad. He took me because he knew I was a fan. So I walked out of both of them, and I was like, those are the greatest movies ever. And he was like, yeah, they were okay, I guess.
Like, yeah, I hate to like just look at somebody and like cast type, but from the times I've met your dad, like I just didn't see him being a huge horror fan. But hey, you never know.
No. All right, well, we should start wrapping it up. We're gonna do tell us something people would be surprised to know about you. If we can make it horror related, maybe a secret movie that you enjoy that's off mainstream, or just something random. I got a couple of random horror related facts that I'm gonna share. Anyone want to go first, or I can go first and buy some time?
You go first.
Okay. So yeah, so I again obsessed with horror movies as a kid. So when we went, and this was in my Instagram stories, so Gary, you probably saw this already. So we went and stayed over Camp Nobi Bosco. It's a Boy Scout camp in Blairstown, New Jersey. It is where the original Friday the 13th was filmed. And I stayed in the cabin where the movie's filmed. So that was just a really cool experience. And we took all these pictures, like mimicking things from the movie. So we stayed in both cabins. I think that this filmed in 2 different cabins. We stayed in, we had people staying in both of them. So we did that. And I took some lake water in an old film canister that I still have, and it's upstairs sitting on my I keep it with my Halloween stuff, and I take it out and put it
like an old 35 millimeter like film canister, like
Correct.
a little plastic one.
Yeah, nice. Little plastic, the black and gray one, you know.
Yeah.
So I always try to get, like, when there's an opportunity to go someplace where something actually happened or something was filmed, I try to do that. So, you know, so I've been to the Monroeville Mall, which is where the original Dawn of the Dead was filmed in Pittsburgh, or Monroeville, Pennsylvania, rather. So I've been to the original camp from Friday the 13th. They changed locations. That's the only time they used it, that camp specifically. So yeah, those are my 2 like kind of random horror movie related things.
All right, I'll go next.
Right.
So this is maybe not as much a surprise as just a confession. I absolutely love hardcore horror films, but probably my favorite genre is horror comedy. And for that reason, I have to leave everyone with what is maybe a surprising recommendation, but it's the movie Zombievers. Have either of you seen Zombievers?
No.
Super indie.
I saw the like preview for it just the other day on, I think, Tubi.
And you're saying Zombievers, like zombie and beaver combined, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. It is pure camp. It's hilarious. It was made for a tiny, tiny budget. And if you want to talk about a movie that these people obviously just had the best time like making, then that's the one. If you've got like a Halloween party this year and you just want to laugh at something with your friends, that is a perfect place to start.
Nice. Gary, what do you got?
So this, not so much horror related, but another kind of, I'm gonna go the same route as Bobby, as making a recommendation for people. There are 2 movies that I can think of, very, very campy, and just, yeah, like I can only imagine what this film crew is actually like during either of these films. If you haven't seen The Velocipaster.
Yes!
Oh my goodness. I have not seen that.
It is the worst great time like you're going to have this year.
And we watched it like 3 weeks ago. It was so good.
So, and the other one, it very, same on the like kind of just cheese meter, whatever you want to call it, like campiness, but good. And it's actually so Velocipaster didn't really have anybody that I can remember in it. But this next one did have Rutger Hauer, who's been in several great films. But Hobo with a Shotgun.
Oh boy, what a movie. Some great gore.
Oh yes, very, very graphic. But just things to add to your watch list.
So, Bobby, have you seen Dead Alive by Peter Jackson?
Yes, the absolute greatest zombie mass killing ever filmed.
Agreed. It's labeled as the goriest. The VHS, this is how back we're going, labels it as the goriest horror film of all time. And we watched it. I'm like, I've seen plenty of horror movies. It's not gonna be the goriest. And we watched it. And I was like, all right, if that's not it, it's pretty damn close.
The lawnmower.
You will never look at a lawnmower the same way again.
Yes.
So I love when Lord of the Rings hit big, be like, oh yeah, Peter Jackson, great movies. Lord of the Rings, Dead Alive. And people are like, wait, what? And I was like, you haven't seen Dead Alive? It's one of Peter Jackson's classics. So I'd always
one weird
that.
Muppet one.
There's some scarring moments in that one too, with the giant woman at the end.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of that movie was the priest.
I
kick ass for the Lord.
Yeah, that's a great one. That is a great one. Highly recommend Dead Alive. Yeah. That we'd always show that. And then let's see what else. Yeah. I think that's it. Any final we got a couple minutes before we get kicked off of Zoom here. Any final shout outs you want to give? We'll start off with Gary. Could be horror related or just OCR fitness related.
Good luck to everybody coming up to World's Toughest Mudder, you included, Evan. Are you doing individual or are you doing a team this year?
I do individual when they tell me I can't run as a team for 24 hours. So
okay.
I don't like relay format for World's Toughest. It's only one event.
Okay. Well, good luck to everybody that's going out there and doing that. I think especially the Spartan Ultra World Championships. I heard rumors or something that's being kind of held in conjunction with Worlds.
So they canceled Spartan World Championships because of the wildfires in California, so that people had the opportunity to transfer to Worlds. I think some people did. Some people just pushed their registration to next year. I think Tough Mudder and specifically World's Toughest is almost a different sport. Even it's different from most ultras because you're wet and you have to wear a wetsuit a lot of the time. So it's I think some Spartan people that will come over, there'll be some guys that obviously will do well. Like, Mark Batras, that was his first World's Toughest last year. But there'll be some people that come over that will, may not be used to being wet and muddy for a full 24 hours and peeing in their wetsuit and et cetera. So, yeah.
You got to pee in the wetsuit.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I have patches from Daniel. I'm not going to pronounce his last name. From 37's Custom Apparel now up on my website. One of them is I love peeing in my wetsuit. So you're going to head over and check out the teamstrengthspeed.com store. Bobby, what do you got?
Yeah, I just like I was saying earlier, finished wrapping principal photography on our most recent short movie. That was a ton of fun. It's called Enlighten, and it should be out by January, I do believe. Although don't quote me on that, but I'm really excited. It was a ton of fun to make, and it is hopefully a new take, something that feels a little bit fresh.
Nice. Yeah, I'll send over some of your other horror movies that are publicly available, like Hell Couch or something. The links for that, and we'll drop them in the show notes here if anyone wants to watch some of other Bobby's short works there. Oh, okay. Other than that, I'll see a bunch of you at World's Toughest Mudder. I don't know if I'm going to record another episode before then. So make sure you say hi. I think we're going to have some mud gear. I know John Coley from Mud Gear is going to be out there. So I think we're a bunch of Mud Gear athletes going to try to clump up and hang out together in the pit and then do my best there. And training's going well. I knocked out some pretty high mileage this past week. And then I've got a bachelor party I'm going to next week that we're doing Resident Evil themed. I sent Bobby one of the previews of some of the stuff. So
good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So I've been texting my friend Sty, like, hey, there's weird stuff going up by the bachelor party location. And like, essentially my friend Anthony had modified newspaper clippings. So it says, instead of Raccoon City, it says like Lake George. So those kind of the preview to this coming weekend. And then we'll have like a use some old Halloween decorations and have some fun stuff going on. So. All right. Make sure you pick up those Bleg mitts from teamstrengthspeed.com. We will typically start running out of sizes as we get closer to the world's toughest. So if you need them, please order them ahead of time. And then, like I said, the patches are up there. And then obviously Ultra-OCR Bible is the best resource you can have to get you ready for the world's toughest mudder. Guys, thanks for coming on. I hope people enjoy this. If people enjoyed it, give us some feedback. If you didn't enjoy it, give us some feedback anyway. Maybe we'll do this every Halloween or maybe not. We'll see. All right. Thanks again, guys.
Thank
you.